give a special welcome to you and want to give a shout out to Mike and Luz Perez, who come to us all the way from Tennessee. Mike and Luz and their family grew greatly in the Lord during the years they were with us, and they had a way that in which God worked through them to bless all of us richly, sometimes gastronomically as well, because Mike had a little restaurant. So wonderful folks, and glad you could be with us up north for a while. We know something got messed up in the migration, right? We're thankful that you're with us and that each one of you was well. Our God saves. That's one of the refrains in one of the songs today. And He works. Even when I don't see either one happening in a particularly strong fashion. He's often in the background. It's not a case that suddenly an angel appears with a great flaming sword and deals with that most irregular person in my life in a way I'd like to have it dealt with. He doesn't show up and all of a sudden flood the scene and leave only a few holy survivors. Our God is still at work, even though we don't see that all of the time. Now, in the last couple of weeks, we've been looking at three people, three biblical characters, actual people, that through whom God was working in very different ways. There was Naomi, a widow, a person who at the beginning of the story was richly blessed. She had a husband, she had a couple of sons. There was a terrible famine, and they reached a decision they needed to take a big trip to the southeast, which meant a long hike east and a longer hike south to get to the country of Moab, a different tribal group, ancient enemies of Israel, although at that time they were getting along well enough that Elimelech and Naomi and her two boys, Chilion and Mahlon, were able to settle there. Now, we understand that they could have stayed, some people did, back in Bethlehem, but they chose not to. They left, and Naomi, as she reflects back, says, I went away full. But then later, she lost her husband, her two sons married, and it was to be a short exile, maybe a brief time, but they were there at least 10 years. They married women from Moab, and then the two sons died as well. And then so at some point she decides, I need to return to my own people. The two daughters-in-law went with her. She, on the way, realized, I don't know if we can pull this off. I'm bringing these two women from another country, another tribe, to my part of the world. How are they going to do there? And I don't know. I can't really provide for them. I have nothing. And so there was, she tried very hard to persuade them all to stay behind. And one did, but they all parted in tears. And then one said, no, I'm not going to leave you ever. Wherever you go, I'm going to go with you. So you can stop the begging. I am committed to you. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. In Moab, we're used to chemos or other kinds of worship there, but the Lord high God that you worship is my God. I've seen His hand, and I'm going with you, even though we are empty-handed. So she comes back. All these negatives. Naomi comes back with her daughter-in-law back to Bethlehem. And Bethlehem was a pretty small, maybe not a frontier town, but just a little pastoral kind of thing. Back in those days, well, they had nothing like we would have here where there's the farmhouse out on the farm. No, the people lived in a village where it was safer. And then they farmed out in their plots of ground, might have had a little shed to keep the sun off them when certain activities were going on. But they all went out to work from there. And it was in that context that some pluses started to appear after all the negatives. Somehow or another, they found housing. Now, maybe this was a house that Naomi, her husband Elimelech, had owned, and they had to move somewhere else. Or maybe they were brought in. There's a tremendous amount of hospitality that was existing in the Middle East back then and even today. You just don't leave people outside. You welcome them in and you feed them. But over time, you're expected to do something about it. But let's just say they said it was she was in her house, so she had something. She had that part covered. Maybe there was a little income. We don't know about that. And later we'll find out there was some land involved, but she didn't have the land use rights to it worked out yet. And Ruth finds some work. It was harvest time for barley, and then it would go on to the wheat harvest a few weeks later. That harvest time was around the time we typically call Easter, Passover. And it was a great time for folks, finally some fresh food. And barley, although it was often animal food, but it was also a popular food to make bread with for people. So she went out and she gleaned, which meant she picked up what was missed by the harvesters. Now, harvesters is not a John Deere or an International. It's Alice Deere bending down and cutting, or in this case, the place she was working was mainly an all-girl crew. They would cut the grain, they would tie it into sheaves or shocks, and leave them, stand them in some way, maybe stand them together so they could dry properly. And of course, obviously no rain during that time, or very little rain. They had to dry before they would try to thresh it and store it. So she's in all of this time. Now, another plus is she just happened to go, maybe in the first place she went to look for work and ask permission if she could glean behind the harvesters, happened to get to a blood relative of Elimelech, the dead Elimelech. And that was a good thing. And that man was Boaz, and Boaz was observing her, how she followed. She was very polite. She was a hard worker, working all day long, and then how she would take home the grain she had gotten to her mother-in-law. And her reputation was really flourishing in the town, Ruth's reputation in Bethlehem. So there was a great chance for Boaz to find out the character and behavior and values of this young foreign widow. And Ruth, at the same time, she's noticing this gentleman is really kind to his workers. Yes, they work. He's out here helping as well. And he blesses them in the name of the Lord. He's God-fearing. He really cares about them spiritually, not just, come on, get out there. We need another bale of this or that. No, he really cares for them. So there's some real pluses that are coming on the scene right now. And I would say that Naomi, who said she came back very bitter, you don't call me delightful or pleasant right now, things are rough. She's maybe beginning to open a little bit and to get a glimmer of hope. Now, as you think about these different ones, Naomi, what was she like? She was worn down. A few of us have been there, stretched to the limit. Nobody here ever has been stretched, right? Yeah, and the limit, is that a feel-good place? Nope. And what happens when you're stretched to the limit? Somebody comes along and proves you can stretch it a little farther, and it isn't pleasant. She was short on hope, and she was very slow to see a way out. So everything was negative, no solutions. Yes, I'm here, that's good. But she had just been worn down by this whole experience. It's just everything stripped out of her life. Her life was pretty much gone. And she couldn't see what was around her. Ruth, on the other hand, Ruth is, I sense she's hopeful. She's going out and working. She seems open to challenge. Yes, I'll harvest, and that's one of the easy. Seasonal workers were needed, although she didn't hire on. She's hard working those long shifts, and she seems to be trustful of things. And she's having to learn a lot of new rules. This is another culture, so they might do some things differently, but it didn't seem to stop her. It's always something that keeps me from moving ahead. She's trying to do her part in this. Boaz, of course, we see him. He's God-fearing, he's respectful, hopeful. He seems to certainly encourage Ruth, compassionate. He recognized her compassion that she continually displayed toward her mother-in-law, and he showed compassion to her as well. Sounds to me like he would have been a good boss. Really, an operation that's really running well. It isn't one of these just, let's all feel good. Well, we got work to get done, but let's enjoy it as we do it. And he valued them as people. And he is established. He's a landowner. They're having a big harvest, so he's pretty well established. Now, these are three different people through whom God is working, about to even work even more. Now, which of those do you feel most close to today to identify with? Naomi? Kind of worn down? Yeah, I know the stretch to the limit does come now and then. I haven't always been able to duck and run from that. It will come. What about Ruth? Oh boy, another day. Let's hit it. Up early. In my household, not everyone is gifted with early. I happen to like that. I think it's great. But don't check on me at the end of the day, all right? Boaz. What about him? Do you identify with him? It's pretty well put together. Looks good on the surface. Or maybe, well, I don't know if I want to go with any one of those. I think I'd like to have a mix of the three. I would like the right to be able to grouse a little bit when things aren't so good. I would like to go out and mix with people and do a little exploration and the gleaning part and out and meeting folks. And I kind of like Boaz that he seems to have certain things made, okay? But why do you feel close to one of these? Naomi, because you're exhausted and little hope. Ruth, energized and hopeful. And I mentioned Boaz, who was appealing to me. It's kind of nice to have it well established. I'd love to have that northern lake place. I do have a boat, but I don't have the lake place. And that would make me feel established. However, is that really established? So all of us probably can think of something that if we were just added, that would make us like Boaz and things would smooth out. Well, life doesn't always work that way. This week we're going to take a good look at how God is working in the lives of all three people, very different people in different situations with different ability to see that God is at work in their lives, and how he shows his favor to those three. Although standing there at the moment, not all three at the same time would say, oh, the favor's here. Still haven't recognized it, but he's still doing it. And how he will show later as we get further into it, and will come next week. This is not a spoiler. We'll see how he's setting up to show favor to Israel. And then, of course, even beyond Israel, to every last one of us sitting here today, and a few that are moving around the hall back there. That's how God is at work in people's lives. Now, Ruth, let's go to Ruth chapter 3. Naomi really is basically, at this point, she's swinging into action. Finally, she's gotten to the point, okay, this is starting to work. I've got to take a step. She's coming alive now as mother-in-law, or mother, basically, in this kind of situation. One day, Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, my daughter, should I not try to find a home for you where you'll be provided for? Is not Boaz, with whose servant girls you've been, a kinsman of ours? Is he not a kinsman of ours? Tonight he will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor. Those two questions, should I not, and is he not, are they really questions? This is matchmaker speak. But it isn't an easy matchmaker deal where, I know, we're about to have our worship team break out, matchmaker, make me a match. Find me a find me a catch. Well, it isn't going to work that way here. These are widows involved. They've been away for a while. And it's not an easy match. Ruth is a foreigner. She's an immigrant. She's widowed. Well, that is a plus in this sense, if you're going to make a match. You can't have a married woman in there. She has a mother-in-law which can be plus and which can be minus, depending on the point of view or how things work out and who that is. Then there's a question of heirs and estates. If somebody marries Ruth, well, what happens to that person's estate? Is somehow this is complicated because she's a widow that of a man, Mahlon, whose lineage goes to Elimelech, which is a clan, part of his clan. And there's land use rights because, as we will see, there was some land to be reclaimed that had been left abandoned by Elimelech and his family, and now that would be reclaimed. And there's some expense involved. Any of you put on a wedding or been in one? How does the money move? Yeah, outward, yes. And at what speed? Yes, a flash. There's a lot to be thinking about. Yes, there's some legal stuff as well. And so this is just not a simple little match. Think a bit about the kinsman redeemer. Boaz is a kinsman. And to be a kinsman redeemer, you do have to be a blood relative, and obviously you'll be of the same clan. The idea is properties and family names kept within the clan. Protector of widows, that's one of the jobs of the kinsman redeemer. And that's laid out in the book of Leviticus. What is to happen with widows? How do you take care of them? How do they get married? And a kinsman redeemer is the primary solution for that. And the kinsman redeemer ensures that there'd be an heir to the deceased husband, as well as the family line of the deceased husband would continue. And then, of course, deals with land rights and the enslaved. There are three ways, probably principal ways of getting into slavery. One is to be captured, so in war or in a raid, and now you're a slave. Another is bought. You bought a slave. And the third one is that we're familiar with, well, actually, probably the last two anyway, captured, bought, captured, bought, and then indentured servant, as here in the U.S. when people would, a broker would pay their trip over to the U.S., well, to the colonies, and then they would have to work 5 years in someone's farm. Someone would buy the rights to their labor to pay back that broker for the passage. That's an indentured servant. Then they were set free. Or someone else could come along and make that payment and redeem them. And the same thing, there was some provision for some of the actual slaves brought from Africa or the Caribbean to be able to purchase their own freedom, although that varied over time. The kinsman redeemer, that's one of the responsibilities, to free members of the clan that were slaves. So this is all in the background, and this is what is going on. When Naomi says, is not Boaz, with whose servant girls you've been working, a kinsman of ours? Tonight he will be winnowing on the threshing floor. She's giving her strategy, how this is going to work. It's going to be the kinsman redeemer strategy. That's how we're going to solve this. One of the things we need to keep in mind when we think about redeemer is that we talk about Christ, our redeemer. Christ, our Savior, Christ, our redeemer. And in his case, there was expense involved. His life, the sinless life given in our place. In his case, our freedom was purchased. Freedom from sin, from the power of sin, the payment for sin, freedom before God, was all purchased by him. Now, land rights, nothing, but boy, there's a whole lot about his inheritance and a new family. Just as Ruth would be brought into Boaz's family if this works, we are brought into Christ's family. And you'll see this in Titus 2, 11. Don't know if we have a slide on that one there. Titus 2, 11 and 12 and 13. No, 13 to 14. I'll read it here. Oh, there it is. For the grace of God that brings salvation has appeared to all men and women. Now I'm going to skip over the next verse, and now while we wait for the blessed hope, the glorious appearing of our great God and Savior, Jesus Christ. It's here this Savior who gave himself for us to redeem us, to pay for, to provide everything that was necessary. You know, some of the same stuff was at stake and going on in Naomi's strategy for Ruth. But this is God's strategy for all people who would receive it. To redeem us from all wickedness and to purify for himself a people that are his own, eager to do what is good. Oh no, you don't have to do what is good to get redeemed, but that'll come out of it. So this is the big picture, and this is kind of a spoiler for next week. Forget you saw this, don't show this to the pastor. Okay. All right. Personally paid for by Christ, new family, and inheritance assured. Now, all the complications. The foreign woman, the mother-in-law, the question of heirs and estates, land use rights, expense. How will this possibly work out? Well, think back a little bit. Those of you who are married, how did it get started for you? How did it get started for you? How did you signal your interest in him or her? Now, guys, if you're going to say something out loud, be sure you get it right. Okay? Here's some of the customs and rules for courtship and marriage. There's the most familiar one, chase and catch. And that's been modified over the years. Scotland, in the year 1228, it was now legal for a woman to propose marriage. The first country that had that as a legal thing as far as, according to this well-founded internet article. Did anyone carve married women, a wooden spoon for you? Okay, don't chuckle, guys. In Wales, back in the 17th century and going forward actually into the early part of the 20th century, the guy would carve a wooden spoon, very intricate. It might have some livestock on there, kind of as a hint that you're going to be, we're going to have good eating if you marry me, some grain, and then some little symbols that might indicate how many kids we might have. And if the woman liked what was offered with that spoon, then, of course, then her dad and mom got involved, and there were probably other negotiations that had to be taken care of. So nobody got a wooden spoon, right? All right, well, they do actually sell them from place to place and hang them on walls. The Western movies, the widow bakes a peach pie for the cowboy. Yeah, you've seen that movie, haven't you? And if I could do a Jimmy Stewart, I don't know how you do is, oh, shucks, kind of thing, Yeah, that exists only in the movies, but we do know that food is a good way to get a guy's, at least get a conversation started with the guy. Victorian society was a little more complicated. And you had to be really dressed up, no sweaters and no jeans or anything like that. And the shirt tail would be tucked in, or you would be tossed in the bushes. So you are invited to someone's home. There'd be a number of eligible gentlemen and a number of eligible ladies. And when the men would come in, they would present their personal card, like a business card, but just has their name on it. No email address in those days. And would present that to some of the ladies. And then the ladies would be thinking of, during the evening, there'd be food and dancing and other kinds of social things, all under the strict supervision of, you guess what, the moms and dads, and the proper English way of doing things. And sometime during the evening, then there was an opportunity where a gal would send her card over to the fellow of her choice. And that was her signal to him, you may escort me to my house tonight. So it would be a carriage ride or walking through the streets of London to the house. Now that didn't mean there was anything more to that than that, but Each one of them had a way they had to, and then if there was a continued interest, they'd be seeing each other. May I call on you, please? And then, of course, there'd be aunts and uncles watching very carefully on the whole thing. So, we have eharmony.com today, match.com, and here's hope, folks, silversingles.com. You must be 50 or above to get involved in that one, okay? So, anyone chaste? No one, we know no one got a wooden spoon. Send a lot of gifts, exchange introduction cards. Well, today's a little different. Okay, how's it going to work? Let's look at Ruth chapter 3, verses 3 to 5. Naomi says to Ruth, wash and perfume yourself. Get rid of those dusty clothes. Put on your best clothes because you want to signal something. Then go down to the threshing floor. Remember, this is a few hundred yards outside of the village. Go down to the threshing floor, but don't let him know that you are there until he's finished eating and drinking. You just don't march right in and become the center of the activities. These people, men have been, and women have been working all day long. They're tired, they're having supper, and they just want to enjoy that. So wash yourself, put on your best clothes, then go on. And when he lies down, note the place where he's lying. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down. He will tell you what to do. Now this is the tricky part, and I think the pastor left town on this chapter. Do not think today in this one. No. This was a formal signal. Uncover his feet, just a corner, and lie down there. He will tell you what to do. There's a lot, and of course Ruth says, I will do whatever you say. That's in verse 5. So there's a lot of trust here. It's built on the confirmed character qualities of Boaz and Ruth. They've already observed that. It wasn't, oh, she's hot. Or look at all those big hairy muscles on that guy working in the field. There's none of that kind of stuff involved here. They really know a lot about each other. And they're following a scripted, formal way of getting to a point. So this isn't the kind of thing, can I take you home, sweetheart? It's not that kind of a deal. This is much showing a great deal of respect and a lot of trust. So, verse 6, so Ruth went down to the threshing floor, and she did everything her mother-in-law told her to do. When Boaz had finished eating and drinking and was in good spirits, it always feels good after a long day working to have a really good supper, get to the iced tea. Back then it would have been wine, and just come to really enjoy the time and kind of that evening glow. And then finally, hey, I'm fading. See you guys. So Boaz went around to lie down at the far end of the grain pile. Ruth approached quietly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. Now, what is not told in here is the guy fell asleep. It becomes plain from verses that come along. But why did he go to the far end of the grain pile? Well, probably it's just a little quiet. Other people are yammering on by the fire. But why are they even out there with a grain pile? Thieves. You want a quick way to get some stuff you can sell or feed your family? You show up in the middle of the night with a little sack. You kind of smooth it over, okay, and off it goes. And the next day, gee, I thought that pile was bigger. So he's there. He's paying attention to it. But he's sleepy enough. He doesn't notice when she picks up the little corner down there of his cloak or the blanket down by his feet and just pulls it over herself. That step she took is a signal of her commitment to Boaz. It's a formal signal. In the middle of the night, something startled the man, I bet. And he turned and discovered a woman lying at his feet. Who are you? want to wake everyone up. Who are you? He asked. I am Ruth, your servant Ruth. She said, spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a kinsman redeemer. She has just identified herself and her intentions, and she's invoking the kinsman redeemer process. This is all very formal. This isn't the made up, I just met somebody, and it's a fling. This is solid. How does he respond? Oh, this guy, whoa, he said, the Lord bless you, my daughter, he replied. This kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. And he's referring to the kindness that she was showing to her mother-in-law. You have not run after the younger men. And there's some nice-looking ones around here. And some of them are, whether they're rich or poor. You haven't done that. You know, that's what young widows would do, or young unmarried women, eligible women. Pick out a younger one. But you haven't done that, whether rich or poor. And now, my daughter, he says, don't be afraid. He's going to get at the legal part now. I will do for you all you ask. All my fellow townsmen know that you are a woman of noble character. And implied is nothing is going to happen tonight in any way to change that. So he's making a firm commitment. She invoked the kinsman redeemer procedure, and he makes a commitment to deliver on it. You know, there's always a yeah, but that comes with these moments. Although it's true, verse 12, that I am near of kin, there's a kinsman redeemer nearer than I. This is a complication. It could be someone else that will redeem Ruth, someone she hasn't met. So here's the risk. Okay, those of you who are female, if you're Ruth, at this moment, what happens? Can we rewind this a bit? Or, what's he like? You want to talk to me about that other guy? Or, I imagine in the ordinary person there could be a sense of anxiety. But it doesn't seem to be here. And I'm wondering, is this Ruth who's really beginning to see again the protective hand of God, his wings spread out over her, that he's moving this. And so she can just leave this and leave the anxiety out there. Fly away, bird. You're not landing on me tonight. So he says to her in verse 13, stay here for the night. And in the morning, if he, that other fellow, wants to redeem, good, let him redeem. And probably under his breath he was wanting to say, and I sure hope not. But if he's not willing, as surely as the Lord lives, I will do it. So lie here until the morning. So that's a holy vow. He's invoked God again in this, referred to the Lord, and he is making something to which he's accountable for the Lord, that kind of a commitment. So she lay at his feet until the morning, but got up before anyone could be recognized. She's an early riser, okay? That explains it right there. And he said, don't let it be known that a woman came to the threshing floor. He also, and then, so let me stop at this point on that one. Why would he say that? That's right. It would affect her, the noble character part. There's always the questions, and we used to call them in Mexico the long tongues, lenguas largas. They will just, the stuff will spread like crazy. Philippines is the bamboo telegraph. Stuff will spread like that. And besides, there's this threshing floor that he's using, there's others nearby, and then, if the hookers in town get the idea, or in the area that, women can show up out there that, weren't part of the workforce, it just changes everything. He didn't want any part of it. He didn't want anyone's reputation tarnished. He wanted the Lord's holiness to be exalted in all of this and to protect her above all. Sounds like a good guy. So, verse 15, he also said, bring me the shawl that you're wearing and hold it out. So she brings this out, and these shawls can be rather voluminous. There are many, have a lot of uses. And when she did so, he poured into it 6 measures of grain from the pile. Don't know how big those measures were. But let's just say it was big. They were big enough that she didn't just flip it up on her back and carry it and would be wrapped around here and then leaning forward on her back. He put it up on her, partly because he was a nice guy, but also this was heavy. And I thought about it, in my notes, this is a signal to Naomi. We're going through this in the right way. You take this grain back to your mother-in-law. And because I can't have you go back empty-handed. But my wife was talking to me about it, and she said, you learn a lot from your wife, guys, if you haven't figured it out. Women, you can nudge them so they catch this. Listen to your wife. There's a lot to be learned, all right? This isn't just contractual, that I'm signaling to Naomi going through it only. The size of this grain, or the amount of the grain, the bundle, is a wholehearted statement of wholehearted provision for Naomi. Remember? Foreign widow, heirs, all sorts, but there's a mother-in-law. What's going to happen to the mother-in-law or mother Naomi? Well, not only you are going to be received into this, but count on it to be with abundance and great welcome. 6 measures. This is a lot. Now, Ruth probably weighed between 90 and 110 pounds. People were smaller back then, not my size, generally. Who knows, this could have been a 50-pound load. Let's make it clear to Naomi, I'm in this for the distance, and she's included. Verse 16. Ruth is reporting back to Naomi, and she gets some counsel from her. When Ruth came to her mother-in-law, Naomi asked, how did it go, my daughter? And then Ruth told her everything Boaz had done for her. And he mentioned the other kinsmen, her request, his declaration of intent, and then added, he gave me these 6 measures of barley, saying, don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed. Then Naomi said, this is Naomi now. She's up to full power, okay? Her hope is beginning to splash. She said, wait, my daughter, until what you find out happens, because Boaz had to go deal with the other man. For the man, Boaz, will not rest until the matter is settled today. Okay, so this is the early morning dawn's light conversation between Ruth and Naomi. The man will not rest. We're going to hold it right here because you have to come back to get the rest of it. But let's think about something. God is working in 3 very different lives. And how much of it, as the people are moving along in their lives, Naomi, she just remembers what she lost and how harsh the hand of God was on her. She was pointing to the losses as being from the hand of God. And then here's Ruth. She's just discovering all sorts of things. Then Boaz, now he's taking a real chance. He's out on the limb. Which way is this going to come down? And his heart is stirred regarding this young woman. But he's got a lot of responsibilities way to go through. But God's working in the lives of these 3 different people, very different people, dealing with different challenges as Redeemer. And he is working in our lives also. I had asked you which one you might identify with. You've got your own circumstances. What are they? How has God been working, or what might he be doing right now? No matter what you're facing, the difficult people you're working with, the challenges, what do I do for my career? How do I get into that college? What about my marriage, Lord? Need some healing? He's at work right there. And he's anxious to do more. You might not be a Naomi in a tough spot, or maybe you are. Some kind of awakening hope. You may be a Ruth, getting good counsel, seeing change, but a lot of things up in the air. You ever been when everything's up in the air? When that kind of thing? Ruth is right now. How about Boaz? You might be like him. You're doing what is right, having a new dream, but you don't know the outcome. But we see how God is working at, and the proof of that will come next week. I'm not going into that. No spoilers here. So what are we going to do? I'd like to say, let's say yes to God. Yes, God, I don't always see it. In fact, I can't figure out how you could be working in this. But in any case, I say yes to you being at work here, whether I see it or not, and hint, it's okay to work even more. And ask him to give you wisdom and hope and to bring his redemptive power. Remember, redeem was to set an inheritance, make us part of a new people, to change us, set us free, rescue us. Bring that kind of power into all facets of our lives, not just on a Sunday morning, but the murderous Tuesday, the Fridays, the Saturday, or when things just plain go upside down. And I didn't mention Monday, did I? God was working in these three, and we'll see the proof of that later. And he's working in each one of you and is anxious to do more in your life. So I want to say this, be like Boaz. Don't rest, but get the matter settled. And let's do that with the confidence that God reigns, he saves, and he's at work.